After a very successful first push, Keystone Wilds has officially started with a stellar entrance plaza. Equipped with 3 ticket booths, a guest relations center, zoo entrance, small coffee shop, and even the beginnings of our first staff zone, our latest adventure has officially begun. Back at our original site, Keystone Park, all operations are functioning up to our standard even in our recent absence. All species are currently thriving and remain in excellent care at the zoo. However, not all species are thriving outside of the zoo. South America is ground zero for habitat loss, as the lumber industry wreaks havoc on local ecosystems across the continent, and local protests sadly have had little impact. This has unfortunately affected many of the species who call Keystone Park home, such as the white-faced Colombian capuchin monkey, jaguar, and more, but none as much as the giant anteater. Their population has taken a major hit since the start of the 21st century, and the expansion of the South American lumber exports leading to the loss of their homes in the Amazon rainforest. Being primarily solitary animals, and territorial on top of that, setting up a breeding program to save their population would be rather difficult, but not impossible. Conservation is one of the core values of both Keystone Park and our current project Keystone Wilds, and anything that we can do to help save the wild population of the giant anteater will do to the best of our ability. In this case, the only option available is realistically quite simple. We need to make more anteaters. Effective immediately, Bear, Keystone Park's beloved and only giant anteater, is being relocated to Keystone Wilds to try and secure a future for its rapidly disappearing species. Traveling with Bear is Keystone Park's second most senior zookeeper. With years of experience, including a majority of the construction of Keystone Park on his resume, we're confident that he's the right man to lead Keystone Wilds to success right on the front lines. We also have 2 more additional hires at Keystone Wilds, including our very first vet. This means, on top of building a beautiful starter anteater habitat, we're also going to have to build a fully functional medical treatment center, equipped with a quarantine, as well as a vet center, to be able to effectively house Bear and his future mate. If you'd like to further support the construction of Keystone Wilds and our giant anteater breeding program, then consider becoming a member of Club Keystone. The link is in the description below. Not only will you receive early access to videos, but you'll also forever have your name immortalized in Keystone Wilds. Thanks to all of our current Club Keystone members for your endless support. We truly couldn't do this without you. If you enjoyed today's video and the continuation of our newest adventure, consider subscribing. Don't forget to like the video and leave a comment too. By engaging with the video in any way, you're telling YouTube to push the video to more people, and the more people that watch, the higher quality content I can produce. We have a lot of exciting news coming very soon, so now's a great time to officially join the team. Don't forget to join the Discord server too. All links are found in the description below. Meet the first animal to call Keystone Wilds home, the giant anteater. With a wild population of only 5,000, this species certainly needs our help. According to the IUCN, they're listed as vulnerable currently, which isn't the greatest. Luckily, the giant anteater is quite the easy animal to build a habitat for, only needing about 660 square meters of land per one. Land is the only requirement necessary, making them a rather beginner-friendly animal. As mentioned before, the giant anteater is a solitary animal, with the sole exception of a mother and her young. Speaking of the young, the giant anteater looks to appear to stay pregnant for 9 months and are easy to reproduce in captivity. As the name suggests, many of the giant anteater's evolutionary traits are equipped to dealing with ants. It's a majority of their diet. The giant anteater can eat up to 30,000 insects in a single day, so we're going to need a serious storage facility. For a solitary animal, the giant anteater has a surprising amount of cohabitation opportunity, including the Baird's tapir, the capybara, the collared peccary, the Colombian white-faced capuchin monkey, as well as the maned wolf. Unfortunately, since this habitat has the distinct goal of producing a baby anteater soon, we're not going to be including any cohabitation today. The first step to building this habitat is recognizing that Bear has spent the past few years living at Keystone Park. Knowing this, we'll have to give him something similar, but certainly an upgrade. The main draw of Bear's habitat at Keystone Park is the moat that separates Bear himself from the guests. It runs across the northern section of the habitat. This is what's called a natural barrier, effectively a landmass or lack thereof that makes it impossible for the animal to escape the habitat. It can really aid in guest immersion as well as safety. Bear's original habitat at Keystone Park, ironically enough, was heavily based off of Disney's Animal Kingdom. They have a female anteater named Annie, and if you have any name suggestions for Bear's future mate, leave them in the comments below. I love hearing them. With the outline of the habitat already being laid out, building the natural barrier is going to be quite easy, since any of the terrain options can't encroach on the already existing path. The first thing that we're going to do is use the chisel feature to ensure that we get this to the right depth. After it's deep enough, we're going to use the flatten to foundation terrain feature and quite simply trace the outline of the path. It's perfectly normal for the paths to have these jagged edges. We'll get rid of them later. For now, all we're trying to accomplish is almost making an island. Once the dimensions of our pseudo-island were relatively defined, I then raised the terrain ever so slightly on the main formation. Giant anteaters are shy, reclusive, and solitary animals, and are going to need a lot of places to hide if the guests get too crowded. Building the terrain up is going to make this a lot easier in the future. Higher terrain elevation also makes it significantly easier when placing the water. It can be a bit janky sometimes. The natural barrier outline is now done, just undetailed. However, we need to start working on the back of the medical treatment center. This is going to act as the left-hand side of the exhibit. In preparation, we first had to make everything flat. It's going to be slightly higher elevated than the rest of the staff area to align with the anteater enclosure. Afterwards, we rather simply placed down both the quarantine building as well as the vet surgery and linked them up with some paths. Eventually in Keystone Wilds, I'd like to have more than one hospital, but for now, this will do perfectly and also act as the backside of the anteater habitat. Not to spoil anything for later in the series, but this vet center is not going to be nearly big enough for some of the animals that we have planned. For now though, this is going to do just fine. Filled with state-of-the-art and modern equipment, our vets are truly going to be able to perform. The easiest way to tackle this highly detailed habitat is likely going to be from working outside in. This is absolutely one of the most important steps in the entire process, as we're building the foundation for the entire habitat now. Though it may seem rather daunting at first, there's a few tricks that we can use to really speed up this process. Let's get to it. First of all, we're going to be borrowing the rock retaining wall from the guest relations building. I really liked how it looked, and this anteater enclosure is very close to guest relations, so it's going to make it more cohesive. In order to make nice looking planters, what I typically like to do is get the walls as close to the paths as possible, but if it's not directly touching it, don't worry about it. There's a trick we can use to mitigate this. Just try to get a nice flow of the wall of your choice and make sure they don't intersect each other at weird angles. Once a majority of the retaining wall is in place, you can then come in with some big mulch pieces and cover up a lot of the terrain. This is certainly starting to take its shape, but there's still those really ugly gaps in between the actual planter and the path. Technically you could line the retaining wall up with the base game path, but that would take forever and is really unnecessary in the grand scheme of things. What instead we could do is take the exact same limestone faux path from the previous episode and place it right above the path, just like we did in the entrance plaza. As you can see, it completely gets rid of those ugly gaps. Not only does this technique look better, but it also takes a fraction of the time. The best part is it's not restricted to rectangles and squares. However, if you're doing an irregular shape, you can't rely on the 4x4 mulch piece. From here we can begin to use rocks, both large and small, to blend the path into the terrain, and also get rid of those jagged edges around where the path used to be. After the path is for the most part covered up, we can then use some much bigger rocks to blend everything together. Now is a great time to mess around with the angles, elevation, and orientation of some of the rocks so you can get some truly unique shapes. Just focus on the big picture right now. We don't have to worry about details yet. Trust me, there's a lot to come. It doesn't necessarily look perfect, but it doesn't have to. Foliage is going to come in later and cover up a lot of the imperfections. What's important now is that we have a structure that we can base the rest of the habitat off. While I think the outline of the build looks pretty good right now, it's certainly lacking a bit of color, and for a tropical habitat this is definitely an issue. Eventually, we're going to have to come in with the rocks and do the exact same technique on the other side of the natural barrier, so I'm going to use the grass terrain feature to mark out that territory now. Water also doesn't just appear, it's going to have to come from and go to somewhere, so we're going to be putting a waterfall from the aquatic pack on the far right side of the habitat and a drainage system on the far left closer to the veterinary office. Now we can finally work some color into the build, and the way we're going to accomplish this is by using these mossy rocks and merging them into the tropical rocks that we've already used. This creates an interesting texture, but it also makes the color appear in really interesting ways that you couldn't necessarily predict if you have random rotation on. The best part about this specific detail is that the dynamic mossy rock family looks like the tropical rock and the mossy rocks put together already. It's just done automatically. We'll use the mossy and the dynamic mossy rocks all over the perimeter of the build that we've already created to get color in to prepare for the foliage. Once that was complete, I set my sights on making a custom fence, and this is a lot easier than one might think. The first thing that I always like to do is start with a piece of mesh or glass or something that the guest can look through. Once that's in place, simply scour the construction menu for a piece that you think will look good. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, it's very unlikely that you'll get it right on the first try. This piece was a little bit too big. Eventually I found just the right piece I was looking for, and it was flexi-color, so I got the exact color I was looking for, 2 in 1. After that I took a very similar piece of the exact same color, angled it about 30 degrees so the guest could lean on it effectively, and placed it at the top of the mesh. Now, with only those 3 pieces used, all we have to do is copy and paste our creation over until it covers the rest of the natural barrier. At the tips of the barrier, where it doesn't blend in quite well, we can use smaller rocks to help this process. Just try and make sure it's not bursting through the wood. Now the habitat thankfully is safe on both ends. The anteaters won't be able to get out, and more importantly, the guest won't be able to get in. The barrier's going to make sure of that. It truly is amazing how good 3 pieces copy and pasted over and over can look, but I have a feeling the shortcuts are going to end here. Whenever dealing with natural barriers, and especially in a tropical format, it's absolutely critical that you get foliage 100% correct. It's one of the more difficult aspects of the game in general. We certainly have our work cut out for us in this habitat. It has a lot of different height varieties, as well as different textures to work with, but this is going to be fun. I started off the foliage grind by actually using a construction piece. I believe this comes from the aquatic pack, and is really nice for lining the bottom of your planters. Making sure that I have random rotation on, I really like to use this as a base layer for all of the foliage in tropical sections. It also helps a lot that it blends in really nicely with the basic terrain grass texture. Typically, trees are one of the last foliage types that I'll add to a build. However, a lot of the foliage we're doing in this portion is going to be to disrupt sightlines and not enhance them. For example, right now, we don't want guests to be able to see the medical facilities, so we're going to be using some pretty big sizable trees to block off that portion of the view. Another semi-advanced tip is you can actually use different foliage types for various things. What I mean by this is right now we're using mangrove trees. I'm using them as bushes. I'm sinking the trunks really low into the ground to the point where you can't even see them, and using them as tall bushes to contrast with the trees. Using the mangrove trees in this way, we successfully blocked off a sightline to where guests can no longer see into the staff room, however the staff can see out into the anteater habitat while on break. When working with foliage especially, it's okay to look at the small picture from time to time. I really like the idea of prettying up this staff area and giving them a spectacular view while on break, so I decided to allocate some time over here and color it up a bit. Much better, and it looks like somebody even brought donuts from Bernie Bakes. Typically this would be a job for buffalo grass, however this Yorkshire fog grass is a little bit more pronounced and it peeks through the foliage a bit better, so we're going to be using this in a lot of the planters today. Just like we merged the 2 families of rocks together earlier in the episode, now we can add bramble bushes to the equation and make it appear that foliage is peeking through the surface. We'll do the exact same technique with the mangrove trees from before, but on the opposite side, because if they were too close to the guest viewing you wouldn't be able to see through them. I really like using the tamarind trees for this purpose as well, because they have these really nice orange flowers that are hard to replicate with other foliage. They're also a fair bit flatter, meaning that guests will be able to easily see over them. It's also crucial that you don't forget to detail the surface of the water. I like to use underwater hydrilla plants because they really blend in the rockwork to the rest of the foliage. One aspect of building that's really important to recognize is that some areas are just tougher to work with than others. If there's an area that's particularly difficult and you don't want guests to see through it, just make a heavy wall of thick foliage so that there's nothing for the guest to look at when walking over here. Like mentioned in the last episode, creosote bushes are absolutely incredible at taking up a large amount of space and making it look really detailed. They're such a large plant with a very nice texture. In areas where the foliage tends to thin out, never underestimate the aquatic faux rocks. They're such a nice piece that are flexi-colored and you can make them match any environment. In this case, I made them a bit more of a gray color to contrast heavy with the browner rocks. After the faux rocks were in place, I used a lot of buffalo grass to really blend and tie everything together. Finally, I added a fallen log that connects the 2 sides of the trench. This gives the build a lot more character that it otherwise was lacking. Overall, I think this is some of the best foliage work we've ever done on the channel. I'm incredibly proud of how it turned out. However, remember this is only the barrier. We still have a long way to go. I think we should probably shift our focus towards the left side of the habitat. That means we have to work on the vet center next, and I could use a break from all this foliage. Let's do it. While it's absolutely critical that the vet center looks good from this angle because this is where the guests are going to be able to see it from, it's equally as important to make it look good from the back, but with a different definition of the word good. You'll see what I mean in a second. Before building something like this, I always like to shrink down to a guest perspective and see the building from the angles that they would so we know exactly where we have to build. Still wanting a little change of scenery, I started at the back at the staff area, using concrete to make the path not float in the air. Sticking to the staff area, I added the first habitat gate to Keystone Wilds. After all of the infrastructure was in place, I started working on the facades of the building, using the exact same metal plank palette we used for the keeper hut in the last episode. Generally, it's important everywhere, but in staff zones especially, cohesion is key. Since giant anteaters like bear have incredibly sharp claws and are capable of dealing some serious damage to a person, we're making a secondary fence just for the safety of our keeper staff. I utilized a lot of mesh pieces of varying sizes. They're really modular and link together rather well. Whenever using mesh though, you have to remember in order to make it realistic, there has to be something connecting it all together, whether it be metal or wood. After color matching the roof, this became the giant anteater's backstage. However, I am aware that they won't be able to actually access it, it's just for show. Once all of the features of the building were in, the details were easy. We already designed all of this in the last episode, and all we had to do was copy and paste everything over, starting with the planks, then going to the gutters, and even the drainage systems. After that, I added a very crude foundation, but crude in a good way. This entire area is supposed to look more utilitarian and used, not necessarily the prettiest. The exterior is certainly getting there. We still have a lot of little details to add, but the base of facade is turning out really nice. I think the best way to describe this backstage would be simple yet effective. I especially like the small detail of the windows of the vet surgery looking out straight into the anteater habitat. We should probably get back to that though, and finish everything up nicely. When looking at the build from this angle, it may appear that it's not even close to being done, but this isn't actually true. Realistically, we have 3 steps left. 1, we have to better blend in the staff area. 2, we have to add a nice backdrop. And 3, we need more foliage. To start, I wanted to finalize the terrain, and I had 2 aspects I wanted to accomplish. 1, I wanted a hill that doubles as cover for the anteater, but also a really nice view for the vets. And 2, using the exact same height as the hill we just made, I then started the rough outline of the backdrop. Contrary to popular belief, I don't plan out my zoos this far in advance. Right now, I'm kinda just seeing what sticks, and if it looks good, we'll roll with it. Giant anteaters aren't very good climbers at all, so I couldn't make anything very steep. I also couldn't figure out how to get the terrain really close to the staff building like I wanted. It acts just like the path. As you can see, when I tried to get it as close as possible, it made a really perfect line, so we needed a way to circumvent this. I then realized we could use the exact same construction pieces we used before, just being very careful not to ruin the immersion of the veterinary office by making them burst to the wall. I then used some dynamic mossy rocks to make sure everything blended smoothly into the ground. I actually got kind of carried away here and started designing some foliage preemptively. Since I already did the foliage at the bottom of the vet, I figured naturally we can go to the top next. One of the only plants you can do this with is the ivy family. Once all of the ivy was in place, I then copy and pasted over the exact same details from the guest relations building over to this one since they share the exact same green plaster. Not bad at all, I really like the view, but I can't help think that something's missing. This would be an excellent spot for a custom education board off the workshop. I actually used a couple of these around the build. I'm not very good at building stuff like this, and if these are your creations, let me know in the comments below. I would say definitively that everything on the guest side of the habitat is done, but now we need to work on the backdrop, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not looking forward to this. It's not that it's going to be hard per se, it's just repetitive. We've already done something very similar to this twice in the build already, building the trench. Rocks, plants, character. Done. Without a doubt, the most important step we've done so far is using the null barrier, and if you're unfamiliar with what the null barrier is, effectively, it's a habitat barrier that's completely invisible. This is exactly what allows you to make custom enclosures, whether you use the natural barrier, a custom fence, or anything. As long as you connect it to both sides of the habitat gate, anything goes. Everything is starting to truly take shape now, but the habitat certainly looks a bit bare in the center. I think we need some enrichment items. To start, I made a hay bed. I know the anteater can't actually get back here, this is just for show. I imagine this is where the keepers would let the anteaters go at night. I then placed the natural termite mound. This is going to be one of the centerpieces of the habitat. I placed their slow feeder about as close to the vet window as I possibly could, mainly to get a good shot for cinematics, but it also looks nice here in general. What didn't look nice was the water pipe. I couldn't find a coherent spot to put it in the habitat, so I hid it in the back. Lastly, I placed a wood rubbing pad next to a bunch of fallen logs. The enrichment items are purposely spread out in a way to force the giant anteaters to explore every inch of their habitat once both of them are in here. Before I forget to mention, it's also perfectly okay to have some foliage peeking through the enrichment items. They're still perfectly accessible. You can also check this on the traversable area, just in case. The main detail of this habitat for now is going to be the light soil path that runs throughout. This is going to be a simulated path. Both the keepers and the giant anteater are capable of traveling off of it, but realistically speaking, this is where the grass would be matted down because the creatures travel on it so much. To further sell the illusion, I came back in with some short grass and tapped on the light soil very gently to make it appear that it was even more faded. After this, I placed buffalo grass over every single inch of the habitat that wasn't covered in light soil. Don't think the light soil was safe from buffalo grass though, it just gets the parched variant. The habitat's officially done. Let me know what you think in the comments below. For the first habitat in all of Keystone Wilds, I think we did an outstanding job. My absolute favorite detail on the entire build is an intentional one. The giant anteaters are either going to be practically invisible or really easy to see. It all depends on what they want. Before the giant anteaters arrive, we still have a bit of work to do in the backstage. We should probably get to that because they're going to be here any minute. Now that the giant anteater habitat is officially 100% completed for Bear and his mate, I think now we can focus our attention to finalizing the medical facility. Thankfully, in case of emergencies, everything is fully operational already. It just needs a few key details. When detailing though, we're gonna have to keep in mind we can't do anything too crazy. Remember, the guests aren't supposed to know that the medical facility's even here, and we did a good job so far. The details in the Backstage started off rather minor, with things like plugs and sockets. I also really enjoyed this recolored sign from the Australia pack. I think I'm going to use this to symbolize Backstages for all of Keystone Wilds. Even though again I'm aware it's not functional, these walkthrough PVC strips are one of my favorite pieces in the game. They look incredible, and I'm glad I was able to incorporate it, at least in some way. Right outside of the Backstage, I added some cleaning equipment from the Conservation Pack. It's one of the best DLCs in the entire game for building Backstages, probably the best. And just like that, the Backstage, as well as the build, was entirely finished. Let me know what you think. Personally, I'm really happy with it. It's quite simple, but it's going to be effective for our employees to get quality work done. We just got word from the head keeper that Bear is currently on his way to Keystone Wilds and is going to be here within the hour. We need to finish our final preparations fast and get the habitat fully ready for his arrival. Welcome back to the zoo, Bear. Long time no see. Thankfully, due to the leadership of our new head zookeeper, Bear's transfer went about as smoothly as possible. While Bear adjusts to his new home, I am genuinely curious. Do you prefer his Keystone Park habitat or his new and improved Keystone Wilds habitat? Thankfully, Bear passed all medical inspections upon arrival to Keystone Wilds. It's evident, however, that changing zoos is a big adjustment for him. He's simply not used to having this much space, which is a good thing. He's also not used to being the center of attention. Bear's the starter animal at Keystone Wilds now. That's a big step up. Before he was kind of tucked in the back of South America. As mentioned at the start of the video, Bear's future mate is still currently in quarantine. He needs time to adjust to his new home alone. That being said, however, if you have any good name ideas for a female anteater, feel free to leave them in the comments. Animal suggestions are also very welcome. I don't plan out my zoos too far in advance. I already know what we're building for next week, but beyond that, truthfully, I have no idea, so I'd love to hear your input. We're growing quite the strong community here, and I truly am thankful for each and every one of you. Sadly though, as the day comes to an end at Keystone Wilds, so does our time here today. I really hope you enjoyed this one. It was an especially fun build. Starting off zoos is always so exciting. Huge shout out again to the members of Club Keystone. That's it for today though. Kingpin out. See you guys next time. It is 3:30 in the morning. Get me to bed.